Want to rise above what holds you back? These are the stories of those fighting that battle. It might also be the story of you. I'm Dan Waldschmidt, author of Edgy Conversations and strategist of billion-dollar companies all over the world. This is Mark Minard, author of The Story of You, the guy who knows a thing or two about never giving up. You're listening to Elevating Beyond. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Elevating Beyond with a two-word mission statement: change lives. And I am here. Look, first of all, a lot of you know we always have amazing guests, and really, with how many of you are so awesome, getting hundreds of amazing inquiries each week, some of the greatest guests that I've been getting have been being connected more and more through previous guests. And I have to give a shout out to my good man, Bill Courtwright, who connected me today with Tripp Lanier. Tripp, I hope I said that right.
Lanier,
of course. Everyone that listens knows that if I get the name perfectly right, they would think something was wrong. So if I edited that out and then said it the right way, they'd be like, dude, what's going on with your show?
What's happening here? Wait a second. It's a glitch in the matrix.
Tripp Lanier. And so Tripp, I have right here, for everyone that's watching on the video too, can check out the cover of the book. Boom. This book will make you dangerous. I love the title. The Irrelevant Guide for Men Who Refuse
Irreverent.
to Settle.
It's got to be irreverent, not the irrelevant.
Got to keep that in.
Yeah.
The irreverent. It's not irrelevant. Wait, those two words don't mean the same thing.
Don't worry about this stuff. It's just, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Tripp, I told you I've been doing this for 5 years. Can't you tell, man? I'm a pro. So that's awesome. The Irreverent Guide for Men Who Refuse to Settle. I still can't get over that, the irrelevant. So yeah, everything is but also Tripp, and we'll get more into that in the conversations, but what I love too is I've had my own business that I built from the ground up, like from starting in 2007 up until now. So that was 14 years ago. And that's a whole other thing, working with individuals with developmental disabilities, and then getting into speaking and having a book and a show. And I really love when I connect with other people on my podcast. Like, being an author is awesome, but who also truly, because a lot of people are, like entrepreneurs these days, but you have 20 plus years of starting your own company at age 23, I believe. And was that like starting with a digital? It said like one of the first digital video.
It was a post-production. Yeah, it was an editing company. So what does that mean? People come to me if they wanted their TV commercial put together, or they had a television program. I did stuff for ESPN all the way to political campaigns, which was soul wrenching. But yeah, we kind of did it all. And I had that company for a total of 12 years.
Okay. And we'll get into your backstory as it goes all in with a book of what you were talking to, because there's some amazing parts. I love how you were talking about how the fear still hits you, even with 20 years of having a company. And a lot of people can relate to that with what they're going through with COVID. I think more than ever now, you'll be able to give some good advice. But something that fascinated me a lot too, Tripp, was was it 12 years, you said you sold it. And I'm just curious as to how that you went about that whole process from transitioning to, okay, I'm ready to, because I know from having my own company, it's like your baby, then it's like a teenager, and then to get to a point where you're like, I'm ready to actually sell this. How did that go for you?
Well, I'd started that company early on with the intention of, I was in my early 20s. So what was important to me at that point? Well, I needed enough money so I could make music and travel and go surf and those types of things. Those were the big priorities. I really wasn't attached to building some big company so I could pull down big numbers and kind of do that whole thing. It was really much more around lifestyle design, which was not a term back then, but I was really clear that the company was going to empower me to have the lifestyle that I wanted to have. And it did that. I was able to create that thing. I created the 4-hour work week type thing well before that book was even written. And I had a lot of people that helped me along the way. I couldn't have done it without them. That said, after a while, it's kind of like, well, is this it? Is this really what I've set out to do? Is this really the work I want to do in the world? And so going beyond just being able to survive and make a living and do well for myself, it was really, what is it that I want to do in this lifetime? What is it that I'm here to give? I started to ask those deeper questions. And I think for a lot of us, we may not start asking them until we're in our 40s, maybe, but I was asking them in my late 20s and had gone through a lot of personal stuff around that time and was just really getting clear, like, look, I don't want to mess around here. I've got some other things I want to do in this lifetime. I don't want to be on this flat trajectory for 10, 20, 30 plus more years. And so that's where I started to get the idea about becoming a coach. And I just wanted to spend my days in conversations with people. Like, what is it that we really want to do in this lifetime? And when somebody said, you could get paid really well to do that, I was like, what, really? And, so that started the process, but I would say it was 2-3 years of a transition. It wasn't an overnight thing. I know a lot of people, like they think it's a big 180 in the middle of the night, and you set out the next day and you put a for sale sign in the yard and you sell your company and you go the other way. But it took a few years, and there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of trepidation and a lot of doubt. Like, what am I doing? Why can't I just be grateful for what I have? What's wrong with me? A lot of those types of things.
And obviously, on the other end of it, it's been working out. And I was looking out that you've been doing professional coaching on so many different levels. And you mentioned it pays well. And where people misinterpret that is when they're like 17 or something and they don't have any experience and they're jumping on and being like, doing an Instagram post saying, hire me to do coaching, but they don't have any actual experience. It pays for, like, when companies and stuff hire me or people, and you, of course, as well, Tripp, because you have years and years and years of actual in the trenches experience.
Right. I think that, on one level, coaching isn't necessarily about being the best at a particular thing. My skill set resides in being able to cut through people's delusions, for lack of a better term, or their junk or their BS, and saying, what is it that you really want to do? What are you waiting to do? And most of the time we're waiting for the right time. We're waiting for to be clear. We're waiting to feel ready. And a lot of times it's about really piercing through that and say, what would you do if you weren't afraid? What would you do if you weren't afraid of being uncomfortable or putting your time or energy or money at risk a little bit? What if you weren't afraid to look like a moron or fall on your face a bit more? And a lot of times folks come to me after they've had some kind of life-changing event of someone close to them dies, or a divorce, or something happens with their company. A lot of people are coming to me now in COVID and like, I've been waiting years to get on to really change course. And, unfortunately I lost my business, or unfortunately I lost my job, but now it's a gift. It's a gift that I can now switch and move into a different direction. And so, how we look at these instances or these events really shifts a lot. We can look at them as an opportunity instead of a disaster.
Did you go through, when you actually transitioned from selling your company, did that work out pretty much the way you had hoped? Was that pretty profitable for you to where it left you in pretty good standing for that next transition for coaching?
It gave me a few bucks. I wouldn't say it really set me up for the long haul. I mean, it wasn't like the company was worth a whole lot without me. It was more service-based company. Okay. So, it was mainly about assets and those types of things. But when that said, it was enough for me to, I would say, kind of stretch out 3 years. And, the irony was that I remember sitting in Hawaii after I sold my company and be like, this is it, man. You sold your company and you're in Hawaii. You should be really happy. And I didn't feel happy. I felt really anxious. And I was like, what am I going to do next? Like, I hope nobody asks me what I'm going to do next. I really just didn't have I had a hunch,
Yeah.
where I wanted to go, but there was still a lot of doubt. Who am I? Who am I to do this work? Who am I to think I can help people? All of that type of stuff was coming up for me. And so I just realized how much we depend on our job, our career, our profession for a sense of identity and a sense of clarity about, well, at least I know on Monday morning I'm going to be doing ABC or XYZ. And I remember like, wow, I'll go fix computers. It gives me something to do. But sitting in that uncertainty of what's next was a really painful place. And it's common for a lot of the clients that I've worked with that have sold a company and secretly feel really upside down without it.
Right. And it helps so much to hear that too, that because everyone goes through that. And when they see something or they just read a bio, like if someone just goes through your bio or so many of my other guests, I always say like the bios don't show the battle scars. And so many of those, whether they're externally and a lot of time it's internally, and it's like that doubt, that anxiety, and also not knowing. And it's okay to not know. Like when you're like, well, I had this, and then I had a perfect roadmap of A, B, C, D of what I was going to do. It's like, Tripp's like, no, I sold it and I wasn't really sure what was going to be next.
Yeah. I felt like a beginner again. I think this is true for a lot of us, is that we tend to think that whatever got us to where we are, if we're in that transition, we can think like, oh, that's over. We're done. Now it has to be completely fresh. It has to be completely brand new. And what I found more often than not is that there's this bit of this hero's journey thing where we go through this into the belly of the whale. And then we start to come out the other side and we realize, wait a second, what I'm doing is not that different. I'm going to leverage a lot of what I've already learned. I'm going to leverage so many of the contacts and the connections that I already have. But when we're in that place and it feels so done and so over, there is a type of death that needs to happen. There does need to be some kind of a separation, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to come back and leverage that later on. And so for anybody that's sitting out there thinking like, man, that part of my life is dead, it's over, it's done, and I'm starting from scratch again, chances are you're not. Most of the time I see people, they think they got to go 180 degrees the other way. Really, it ends up being 15, 20 degrees of a difference from what they were doing before. And they're able to leverage so much of what they've already done.
A lot of it's like that it's not like we just have, at least personally, I think we don't only just have one purpose to do one thing. It's more like it's a variety of things, and that wisdom keeps building that foundation. And it's almost like there's different levels to our purpose. So like you said, when you kind of started doing something at another level, you weren't still running that company, you're doing it, but you were able to draw back. And a lot of it's even lessons learned from building like the confidence muscle of things, of how you did that. And you're like, man, if I was able to get through that and do this, then I can get through this next thing and do it. And I can now at the other level teach others how to do it as well.
Exactly. That's a great point. I like that you brought up the word purpose, because I think sometimes we can get fixated on this idea of purpose. And I think so many of us get confused by it. So I talk about this in my book a little differently, that the purpose in our life is always going to be very, very much the same, meaning that no matter what we do, we ultimately want to feel free. Ultimately, we want to feel a sense of aliveness. We want to have a deep sense of love and connection with the people in our lives. And ultimately, we want to have peace of mind at the end of the day. If we're on the other side of that, if we're feeling trapped or drained or isolated, lonely, bored, overwhelmed, those are indicators that we're off. And when we're in that state of mind, we get into a place like, I must be doing something wrong. I'm out of alignment. Those are the indicators. Those are like, when you drive over those bumps on the side of the road, they're like, and it's like, oh, wait, I'm off track here. So instead of numbing ourselves, I'm going to go drink, I'm going to go look at porn, I'm going to go do all this other stuff to numb myself from that annoying experience. I can get curious instead and say, all right, well, where could I feel more freedom, aliveness, love, and peace of mind in my day? And so if we were to think that the purpose of our lives is to have those experiences, then we can look at our relationships, the work that we do in the world, actually where we live, how we treat our bodies. All of these things are either contributing to those experiences or they're taking away from them. And so from that place, we can have many missions in our life. And I think this is where people get a little wrapped around the axle and say, well, wait a second, my purpose in life is to build this company and do blah, blah, blah. Well, okay, you do that in 10 years. Now what? Right? That wasn't the purpose of your life. That was a mission. You completed the mission.
That was a season. Yeah.
That was a season, right? So so let's come back. All right. So what's the next thing? What's the next mission in my life that aligns with freedom, aliveness, love, and peace of mind? And I think it keeps us from feeling like, oh my gosh, my life is really upside down and screwed. It's like, no. You just finished that arc. You finished that season of that show, or whatever you want to, however you want to look at it. And now it's time to step into the next level. Everything in our life has these seasons, beginning and ends. Why would we expect our relationships or our career to be this flat, set it and forget it type of thing, even though that's what most of us are striving for? So I like to come back to this idea of what's the next mission, and that keeps us flexible. It's like, great, what if I'm going to have 20 missions, 20 professional missions in my lifetime? That's a lot, right? Most likely it's probably going to be 2, 3, 4. But it's like, okay, well, now I've got a curiosity. What is the next one? And I can feel myself, instead of feeling beat up and worried and lost, it's like, yeah, what's next? I'm ready to dive in. Let's go figure out what this next mission could be.
I also love, you said curiosity. There's a great guy I know I had on, his name's Ken Coleman, and he was talking about interviewing and meeting with of course, I'll probably butcher, Condoleezza Rice, George Bush Jr., John Maxwell. He works with Dave Ramsey also. And I was asking him, what is one of the main things with you spending so much time with all these really high performers and successful people in their own areas that they have in common? And his answer was epic curiosity. And he said they're always they never stop being curious to keep learning more and interested, well, I wonder how that works. And they're never thinking, I know it all, I've arrived. Like, they have this endless epic curiosity.
I like that you brought that up. I mean, I basically make a living being curious. My job is to draw out things from my clients, like to see them as the leaders of their lives or their business, and draw out that leadership. It's not to impose anything on them. It's not this is how you do it. It's like, how do you think you should do it? How do you think you should approach this challenge? How would you do this if you weren't afraid, or you weren't stuck in trying to people please or prove that you were special? We just to draw that stuff out. And then obviously with interviews, I'm being curious as well. So I think one of the really helpful things that we can glean from that is, let's imagine that there's a spectrum. And on one end of the spectrum is this curiosity. What do I want to learn? What's really happening here? I want to gain more clarity. And on the other side is a defensive-ness, a need to prove, a need to be right. And you can look around and you can see where there's a lot of that going on. And it's one of the reasons why we probably are really having a hard time solving problems, is because the first thing we're doing is defending our position and then making sure we're right about that position. Well, we're not listening to one another, and we're certainly not in a place where we're going to be creative or find a solution to things. So that's an indicator for me when I feel myself defensive and I need to change somebody's mind, and I'm wagging my finger and I've got an agenda about how things should be. It's like, oh, I could be a little curious right now. This is one of those opportunities. What would it look like if I were curious right now, instead of needing to be right or approved of in this moment?
Isn't that, and that's so spot on, because I know you talk a lot about leadership too, and isn't that such a serious, key component of great leadership? Like, not leading based on fear, but leading where you're able to be even accountable and drop that and have that humility to be curious enough to be like, whoa, just because I'm the leader, I'm not supposed to know it all. And I just, by arguing and trying to prove myself right, rather than how can we learn more and take the whole mission or the team or the company or whatever it is to that next level, it's drop the guard and open up to really have that humility. And like you said, listen, I've always to check yourself, or even your ego would be, I guess, the key there, is to let your ego stop talking, being like, I don't have to always look like I'm right.
We don't have to look like we're right, but we can always, I think it's one of the things, like, to what degree Am I protecting or pleasing or proving? So why do I say it that way? Because we're doing it. This is just what we do. I'm doing it right now. You're doing it right now. This is what we do. We have a sense of who we are. We're going through our lives and we're protecting ourselves, which means that we're covering our ass. We want to make sure nothing bad happens to us. Okay, that's good. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can get out of balance. The next thing is we're kissing ass. We're pleasing. We're people pleasing. We're trying to make sure that people like us and approve us and that we look good and all of that other kind of stuff. And we live in a society, in a civil society, so we want to get along with people. But again, that can get in the way of what we're ultimately here to do. And then the third part is that we are proving, hey, we got to make sure we prove that we're not an ass. Hey, look how important I am. Look, I'm going to step over you and what you have to say, because what I have to say is more important. I need to be the big guy here in the room. And if we were to watch out for where we're protecting or pleasing or proving, that's where we can start to relax all of that stuff and say, okay, what if I didn't have to protect or please or prove so much? Maybe I could be a little more curious here, and we could start to find ways to be more expansive instead of looking at the world as a place to get something. I'm going to get your money. I'm going to get your approval. I'm going to finally feel important and all that kind of stuff. I find that that path is more of a path of diminishing returns, but real leadership, to come back to that point here, is when I tap into that thing of what am I here to give? What am I here to express? And I get something in return. That's where I feel most expansive. I just find that that's where our peace of mind is allowed to arise.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. I mean, the serving component of it's again, like, what actual, not out of ego, but what values am I really bringing in, services am I providing and helping people as a leader, and what am I truly doing? And like, sometimes too, Tripp, like, what do you suggest to people that get confused with people pleasing, but also being driven too? Like, where you're needing, I'm trying to figure out the right way to say this actually, because those aren't the two things. It's more like being humble, but also you have, as you know, and we all know from having our own company, you also have to be driven to work really hard in different seasons, or there's times when you can do everything right and everything can still get flipped upside down. And it's like, man, like, you have to have something like that really keeps you driven while still being humble. Does that make sense? Because some people confuse that sometimes when they get in to business or something, and they think that if I'm just humble and caring and stuff and don't have an ego, then I'll be successful. But they kind of can leave out the whole drive part.
Yeah. On one end, it sounds like, what am I here to express? What am I here to share? What am I here to create? But I got to make sure I don't rock the boat. That's where the pleasing comes in. Okay. And this is a big thing. We worry, we can worry about what others think, and we can certainly worry about whether somebody gets upset with us. But I think we have to come back and say, well, what is the mission here? Is my mission to make sure that everybody likes me? Is the mission to make sure that I don't ruffle any feathers and I don't get any down votes, or I don't get any of this type of stuff? And you might start to recognize, well, the mission's bigger than that. The mission is bigger than being liked. Now, I still think that we can be compassionate, humble human beings where we care for one another and serve one another, but we can let go of this idea that everybody's going to like us and everybody's going to get it. And that's a real edge to walk here. And I think we can figure this out where we either collapse, like, if I'm going to get criticism, oh no, I better not do anything to be criticized or get any kind of pushback. That's an indicator that we're doing the pleasing thing and we're making ourselves smaller. And on the other end, we can puff ourselves up and be like, I don't care.
So sorry, Tripp.
Yeah, no problem.
We're jumping back on here on my end. It's raining here and lightning struck, I think, nearby, and literally everything just zapped off completely and then popped back on. So we reset it and we are jumping back in here.
We're back in. Yeah. We were talking about how pleasing gets in the way of, this desire to be humble. I actually see this a lot with people that I work with. It's just, these are people that actually have experience and they have an ability to help folks. And they do this thing where they kind of like, oh shucks, you know, who am I? I'm just this person with 10, 15 years of experience, and I've done this and that, and I've managed millions of dollars in ABC. But I don't want to, I don't want to call any attention to myself. So there, in an effort to not look like an arrogant douche, like to not really stand out from the crowd and seem like like somebody who's craving attention, they diminish the truth of who they are. They diminish who they are instead of just tell the truth. The truth is I've done this for X years. I've helped X amount of people. I've brought in X millions of dollars, or I've managed this, and just tell the truth.
Right.
But there's some cultural thing which is like, hey, I need to diminish who I am in an effort to feel humble. Humble is just telling the truth. There's a difference between diminishing who we are and actually owning who we are. So when we come back to this idea of leadership, leadership means owning who we are, not inflating it, but also not deflating it. And that can feel edgy for folks when they're like, well, gosh, I've actually done some pretty exceptional things, but I'm a little afraid to stand out from the crowd. I'm a little afraid to stand out from the herd.
That, Tripp, on all so many shows over the years, this is one of the few times this has been brought up like that. And that hits me, makes me personally think, especially from having a company and everything, and then getting into having a book and speaking and all that stuff too. I remember like when everything was continually added into my bio, and just like what you said, it like has built a multi-million-dollar company. And I was like, well, I don't want to have that on there. That's going to make me seem arrogant or whatever. But in all honesty, if I'm being real about it, really it was more of a fear of me thinking, what are people going to think about me, or how are they going to judge me? But it wasn't really a fear of, I wasn't doing it like just for the spotlight for the wrong reasons, but to say, hey, I want to be the best speaker in the world and have the biggest podcast. Like I'm all about going after those crazy goals. But then when that stuff's announced, I remember, and it still will hit me. I remember thinking like, I wonder what some of my team members, even with my newest book, I'm like, I wonder what they're going to think when they're reading the back of it and it's saying all these things about me. And I think like part of that is what you talk about in your book, even with the fear and the mediocrity. It's almost another level of like the mediocrity and stuff trying to hold us back.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely a herd mentality, which is you don't want to do anything that has you stand out from the herd. You're going to be pulled back into that mentality. And that's a really primitive way for us to think. And it was really around, survival. Well, here we are in this day and age. And I still think that we can serve. Put it this way, if I need a brain surgeon, I don't want him to be like, oh, shucks, I guess I'm all right. No, I need to know. I need to know that you have worked for X years and you've saved so many lives and you've seen these cases. Don't hide that from me. So if we really are in a position to serve, it helps others make an informed decision if they understand our experience and what we're bringing to the table. I want to know those things. Hiding that stuff from me, being humble, quote humble, because I don't think that's actually humble, but like diminishing yourself doesn't help us. Bring all of who you are. You're not going to step on anybody by simply being who you are.
Right. And it's not the same also as where every place that brain surgeon goes, where he's like getting coffee and they're like, oh, how you doing, Ryan? He's like, it's Dr. Ryan. Like
Dr. Ryan, I've spent 20 years helping millions of people. And like, you better recognize. No, that's not appropriate, right?
That's the other side of it. But no, it's really spot on. And that was where I kind of want to talk to you about too, Tripp. With your segue, you talked about being there in Hawaii. You had sold your business, and then now years and years later, how did you go through the point of, you've been doing professional coaching, I think for 7+ years since then. And then also
15 since I sold my company.
Oh, yeah. 15. Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So
and podcasting
years.
podcasting for 13. This is where I do the douchey thing at the coffee counter, right? But
no.
Yeah.
No, it's not at all. That's amazing. No, it's credibility. It opens up the door for the right type of conversation. And wow, 13 years, man, that's awesome. Because things were so you really got into it, and I'm sure that was going when people weren't really even hearing much at all of podcasts 13 years ago.
Yeah, I was coaching some founders of this startup that were basically, the startup was, they were trying to do an ad model, a network, essentially a podcast. And so they were like, hey, would you ever consider having your own podcast? And I was like, I don't even know what is a podcast? I don't know what a podcast is.
Right.
I got a background in broadcast and I got a background in all these other things, but I didn't understand what podcasting was necessarily. But, had they not invited me into that and had they not had a team to help me create all that stuff, I wouldn't have done it. But yeah, it was the Wild West. It was the early days of those things. And, it was a lot of fun figuring it out. And there were people that were trying to monetize it really early on. And I saw a lot of them sink, and it taught me a real lesson of just serve people, just put out content that's going to really help people instead of trying to put out content where people are going to give you money. And that's how I've used it ever since then.
Right. Doesn't it all interconnect too? Because tons of the listeners are not only are business owners, but there are a lot of business owners branching off into speaking, writing books, coaching. And I always talk about the importance coaches need coaches at every different level too. And to hear that advice, because when people overanalyze with something like a podcast, some people I'll work with and they'll be like, well, Mark, should my show be exactly 9 minutes and 30 seconds long? Or I've been measuring it, and after 12 minutes, I'm like, I've done 10-minute shows, I've done 2-hour shows, and I really would look at the statistics, and some of the 2-hour ones would have more downloads than the 10-minute ones, and sometimes vice versa. And really, it's, if you're talking about stuff that people are interested in, they'll keep listening. But there's not an exact 19 minutes on the spot. It's at least that's what I've seen in my experience. It's kind of what works for you.
There's two different, we want to zoom out and kind of tie how this relates to everybody here, right? So if you look in that example, there's two different mindsets. One is, tell me what to do. What's the right way? Give me the formula. That's not leadership. That's following.
Right.
Oh, okay. It's 9 minutes and 30 seconds. And then Mark says to make sure that you've got the frequency response is this, and that you put your bump here and you do this. And then that's the key, right? That's one mentality. That's a herd mentality. Tell me what to do. On the flip side is another mentality. What am I here to share? What is it that I know will serve my people? I am in touch with people. I'm serving them, and I'm going to share this stuff, and I'm going to put this out in the world. And I'm going to share. It might be 2 hours. It might not have the fancy stuff on it. It might not have this and that. And we can certainly be informed by it, right? That we can stay curious, say what would make it better. But deep down is this desire to serve. And we may find that it goes against the grain. It goes against what the herd is doing. And those people be like, he's nuts. Did you see he put out an 11-minute podcast? Everybody knows it's got to be 9.5 minutes. What an idiot. Right. But on the same level, it's like, you're not worried about that stuff. You're honing in on a different path or a different direction that's more internally driven, more intrinsically driven, instead of how can I measure up and compare to the rest. And that's why I call this book will make you dangerous, because that will seem dangerous to those in the herd mentality. In the herd mentality, it's dangerous to do anything on your own. It's dangerous to think for yourself. It's dangerous to do something that might be a little uncomfortable or risky, or, geez, what are they going to think about me if I do things a little differently? That's what constitutes as danger and what we largely have as a cushy modern life.
Right. Or avoid, like what you talk about, success looks like failure in the middle. It's really avoiding that failure. It's, I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to risk failing. So I'm going to do whatever I need to do, act like I'm smarter, or protect my ego, or there's all different ways. So I don't have to go through that part of looking like an idiot, which
learning.
That's learning. The only way to do it.
That's the learning process, right? Which is, gosh, I got to go through this suck and figure out how to do this. I'm going to break a few eggs making this omelet. Like, it's just not going to work out. And for those of us that are like, I got to look good at everything that I do. I need to be the one who's right. I've got to be the one that is in charge or in power. And, I've got to be important and all that kind of stuff. Sucking at something is not an option. We sucked back in whatever, grade school, and we're not going to suck anymore. But for that part of us that's curious and more committed to, hey, what is it that I really want to do? Oh yeah, freedom, aliveness, love, and peace of mind. Well, I'm going to be a noob. I'm going to look a little foolish from time to time.
Right. And understanding that's part of the actual process versus what's wrong with me? Why is this happening? This is the only way there. And for you, Tripp, as you transition from having your business, well, you've had multiple businesses because coaching and everything you're doing now as an author is a business, of course, too. But from having what was your foundational business to begin with, selling it, what was like one of your biggest struggles where you really went through that failure or that doubt or that adversity in the middle before you felt like you kind of broke through that next breaking point of like, whoa, I actually am having some success. I'm helping people. I'm actually making some revenue where I can live a life too.
I would say the biggest mistake that I made, and I can't really call it a mistake anymore because, it's a key part of this book. It's a key part of the work that I do with clients, but man, it was a pain in the butt while that was happening. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was holding out when I was in that transition period. Okay, what's the next phase of my life going to be? I was holding out for the perfect plan. I was holding out for the clear direction. I wanted to see how steps 5, 6, and 7 were going to work out before I invested any time or energy or money. I didn't want to trap myself in a job, and I didn't want to risk I certainly didn't want to look foolish, right? I didn't want to go down a road and be like, that was dumb. Why did I do that? I was such an idiot. I didn't want to have any of those things. So I essentially was a spectator of my professional life. I wasn't in the game. I was just sitting up in the stands, kind of waiting for things to happen. And any kind of ideas that came along, my fear-based mind would find whatever way to sink it. You didn't think about this. There's this thing that's going to come up and that could sink it. So ideas off the table. Oh, what about this idea? No, you can see obviously that could fail. So we better not do that. And I sat there and just sniped every single idea and possibility that came along. Lo and behold, it didn't take long for me to feel really stuck, really trapped, really drained, worried, anxious. Like, what the hell am I doing? I'm sitting here wasting time. I'm wasting my savings. What can I do? Everything seems like so risky to me. And I said, you know what? To hell with this. I'm tired of approaching my life and my career in this way. I'm going to focus on what actually has me feel alive. I'm going to focus on what actually has me feel more expansive and more whole. And stop trying to figure out and solve for steps 5, 6, and 7. Life's too short. I could be dead in a year. I'd rather spend my time doing something that has me feel more alive and more whole and build something around that so that no matter what, I enjoy the process. I'm not trying to race to some finish line where I can be done, set it, forget it. And when I started doing that, and I really started to get in touch with the things that enlivened me, I could look in the rearview mirror and see how the dots were lining up. Whereas before, I couldn't see how that was going to happen. And so that got me in the game. That got me experimenting. That got me back into this process of learning and being a noob. And all right, here I go. And I might look foolish here. I'm going to ask dumb questions or whatever it might be. But I got into the game, started learning those things, and I was enjoying myself as I was going along. And that had a huge, huge impact on me.
So to everyone listening now and that's going through, because you mentioned one other part in your book and something there I just want to repeat for everyone to hear that was such a great point, Tripp, that you mentioned through that you kind of woke up, because we can get caught in the day that like what's going on yesterday or where I screwed up last week when we're looking in that rear view mirror instead of looking over like the past year and like getting out of that moment of madness and being like, wait a minute, a year ago, I was way back here and I didn't even think that I'd make it this far. And now I've actually made it this far. And like you said, those dots start connecting more and more. First, when you get stuck in that cycle of, oh my gosh, this didn't work out yesterday or last week, and you're not really putting into perspective months and months of how far you have actually come and how you're progressing.
Yeah. And also having a different metric. For most of us, we tend to measure objective things: how much money, how much time, how many likes, how many listens, if you're talking about podcasting stuff. But it's like we tend to look at that stuff and it's like, okay, but am I enjoying this?
Right. Right.
Something
It's
that
so true.
I want to just simply do more of, or is it, I freaking hate this. I dread doing it. I don't want to do it, but I got to do it. And hopefully one day I'll be done doing this. And to me, again, life's too short. If we don't have any kind of contact or grounding in a spiritual self and a part of us that's bigger than this need to be successful, then trying to escape our lives becomes the purpose of our lives. We're just trying to get out of it because it sucks so bad. I want us to appreciate our lives. I want us to appreciate the work we have. Will there be days that suck? Absolutely. Will there be work that sucks from time to time? Absolutely. But I think if we ground ourselves and say, look, I'd rather create something that I enjoy doing that has me feel more whole and more complete than do something that has me want to escape my life. Those are the people that I'm helping. They've already done the thing that had them be really successful, but they hated it. And now they want to play this game. Like, can I integrate something? Can I integrate the skills and the connections and the network that I've got to do something really meaningful at the same time while enjoying it instead of trying to get away from it?
Wow. And maybe sometimes, Tripp, too, maybe for a season it drove them and it was part of their purpose, but then they got to an end point where they realized, like you said, they were hating it. And people ask just what you ask, in your book, is this it for me? And you break it all down as to absolutely no, it's not. And I love just your real talk through it. That's the way I talk. That's just the way. You don't try to you just real to the point. You give great examples. And something I wanted to end off too with everyone that's going through fear right now. And it's normal that we're all going through. This has been the only time that we've gone through this weird time in history, and different people facing so many different obstacles within their companies. You talked about a part in your book, and you're like, from 20 plus years of having a business, I still struggle with fear. And you're like, and I should be like, but dude, I've had this for 20 years. Why? And I'll still hear those voices of doubt. Tripp, you're not good enough to do this. What if this falls under and I go completely bankrupt? And you gave one example of you tap into, you remember like back in your college days when you were living in this teeny little apartment and you had no money for food and lived off nothing, and we're playing music, and you're like, if I got through that, then I can get through this. And I just like, what else do you have for people, and how else do you deal with that when that fear really is hitting us on these days?
Well, the first part is that the fear's going to come. I think this is such a big topic, and there's this thing of like, how can I avoid feeling scared? Like and people will sell you products for this. They will sell you books. They will sell you programs. Having you believe that you're going to finally not feel fear anymore. You're going to finally not feel vulnerable anymore. Right. And what you want to do is you want to run away from those people as fast as you can.
Right. Because it never goes away.
It never goes away. What happens is we adapt. We adapt. What used to scare us no longer scares us. If anybody has kids, you know this, right? It's like there's that day, like my daughter's like, she sounded like she was being fried, being burned alive if we were going to tell her to put her head under the water. Now she loves swimming. I can't get her out of the pool, right? So we just adapt and find new things to be afraid of. And that's normal. I think what helps us though in that process is to zoom out and be like, okay, I'm afraid and I've gotten through a lot. Chances are I'm really going to get through this too. But it's okay to be afraid right now. It's okay. I don't need to get stuck here. I don't need to freeze here. So what's possible, right? Who could help? A lot of times, this is especially for guys that I work with, we tend to isolate. We don't want to show that we're afraid. We don't want to reveal that we want help. And so we take it all on. It's up to me to do something. But I think if we can pivot out of that freeze that tends to happen when we get scared, where it's all on me, I have to know what to do. I have to have the perfect plan, and I can't be helped, all of that kind of stuff. And just get into like, well, what could I do here? Somebody else has already figured this out. How could I be helped in that process? What's the thing I'm trying to create? And what I've noticed is even just talking about it, just even getting it off our chest, like, man, I'm really worried about my business is going downhill. I don't think I'm going to pull out of this COVID time. Just a lot of times it just helps to get it off our chest. And often when we get it off our chest, we can start to be like, and I've always had this other opportunity. I've always had this idea for this next thing. It starts to move, and we're no longer eclipsed by that fear. But there will be days where it's freaking scary. Right. And we may need to just go be scared for a while, but that's a great time to go talk to somebody, go journal, but then pivot back and do what would help this right now? What's the problem I'm trying to solve? And then who could help me solve that problem?
It gets you out of your own head where when we're really dwelling in that fear, I know me, I can just get so internally, and it's like when something's buffering and it's like, I just keep going and it's like, I'm downward spiraling. It's almost like when you talk to someone else or get it out, it's almost like a slap in the face. Like, okay, that gave me like some perspective that I needed. And,
yeah.
And the other thing you mentioned too, Tripp, and I know we're getting close to wrapping up here, and thank you for going a little over too from the power going off, but getting that, I already just lost my train of thought. I'm not afraid to say that I have ADD. Man, I was going somewhere good with that too.
Just saying that just talking about the fear slaps us in the face and then jolts us out of that.
Thank you. That's why, hey, that's why Tripp's a pro, which also as the host of the New Man podcast, which everyone needs to check out. I loved what you were saying there about the fear. Those that try to give you these quick fix solutions of buy my course and you'll never have fear again. Like you were saying, run far away from them, because not only does fear never go away, you learn to get better at it. You learn to have a different perspective of it, but also you said it, sometimes it's okay. Just allow yourself to fear it, to feel it and go through it. And,
right.
And literally just to hear the words, and that's okay. Like we all go through it. And I always say, as a matter of fact, if you're not having times in life where fear is hitting you at different levels, then you should be scared, because that means you're getting stuck, what you talk about in your book, like back into that land of mediocrity. And if you're continuing to push after those bigger things, which you talk about so much of what makes you happy in those different levels of your purpose, being happy and going after that doesn't mean that you're also not going to go through days that are hard as hell and where you're terrified. Because people think, well, if I'm going after my purpose, every day is just roses and butterflies and jelly beans and rainbows. It's like, no, some days suck really, really bad, even when you're doing what you love and you're like, I don't want to do this, but It's just temporary.
Yes. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. I hate this idea that, if you're scared or it's hard or challenging, you must be doing it wrong. It's like, well, no, it's not. It doesn't have to be a slog. But at the same time, it's the difference between like paying off a bill right when you get it or putting it on a credit card. You still got to pay it either way.
Right.
So a lot of times what we do is we're trying to push it down and be like, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with this. Well, meanwhile, we're kind of racking up debt. We're racking up anxiety debt, right? It's like, it festers in the back of our mind. I got to deal with this thing. I got to deal with this thing. I got to deal with this thing. Meanwhile, it's just getting more and more expensive to deal with. There's no outrunning some of the bills we're going to have to pay in our life, whether it's with our health, it's in our relationships, with our business, whatever that is. And so my point is that we may find that the greatest move is to just turn directly into the thing and pay it off now. Just pay it, get done. And it'll sting. It'll sting like hell. Oh man. Yeah. But I'm done with it. I'm going to be done with it until the next one shows up. But most of us are looking for a way out. We're looking for a way to bypass or get around that stuff. And that's where these shortcuts and these hacks come in. And I think that's a real young way to look at life, as if there's some cheat code to get around stuff. But then life is ultimately really disappointing when you have these things that show up. Your business gets in trouble because of a virus that's outside of your control. You get in a car wreck, your partner gets sick, whatever these things happen, we got to pay that bill. And so let's quit acting like there's going to be a cheat code or there's something wrong because these things show up. This is life.
Right.
This is life. So let's learn how to turn directly into our problems. And that's hard. Even as I say that, there's a part of me that wants to run the other way when they show up. But ultimately, if we're really in alignment with freedom, aliveness, love, and peace of mind, we'll find that heading directly into those problems and dealing with them quickly ultimately is what gives us the greater expansion.
I appreciate everything with you, Tripp, with the transparency. And this is what everyone needs to keep hearing, is what everything you're teaching, you're saying, hey, I still battle this, by the way. I just continue to not let it stop me. By the way, sometimes it does stop me, but then I don't sit there and dwell on that every day. Then I get back up and I keep moving into it. And as you said, that anxiety debt, and putting interest on that anxiety debt is the worst thing to do. Then it just festers up into a whole snowball. Haven't heard it put that way. I love it. Tripp, let's see if I can get it right this time, everyone. It's "This book will make you dangerous. The irreverent," that's right, irreverent guide for men who refuse to settle. And also Tripp's podcast, the New Man podcast. Tripp, where is the best way for everyone to grab your book? Is there a main website you want them to go to check you out?
Just whatever country you're in, Amazon's the best way to get the book. And then you can always check out The New Man wherever you get your podcasts.
Awesome. Awesome. And I'm sure you're all over social media. Is there one platform that you're on more than the other for people to connect, or?
I don't really pay much attention to social media, but you can find me on there.
Yeah. You're not counting your likes every day and comparing yourselves.
It's not really high on my my priority list. No.
That's awesome. Well, look, Tripp, it's been an honor. I appreciate the time today, and I love everything that you're doing. It's my style. It's what my guests always love, what we need to hear. And I look forward to connecting more in the future. So listen, everyone, like Tripp said, it's okay to feel that fear. Just don't allow it to stop you. Keep going towards it. Keep going through it. It's the only way to get past it. And never settle, never give up. Keep elevating beyond.